Welcome back, class. We hope you had a great week and hope you continue your studies and follow along with us in this presentation of Who Am I? A series in the New Life Behavior Ministries in the lessons under the title A Sense of Self. And so our first lesson we discussed Who am I? And we asked some valuable questions about that topic and reviewing to see who we really are and how we view ourselves and how we view God in our lives and how we relate to Him. God through His providential care, communicating to us His message, and then we, in turn, evaluating ourselves based upon that message and finding a real sense of ourselves. And we discussed having the ability to have free will to make our own decisions and our choices in life. And without that free will, of course, an atheist would say, without that free will, then we are just a bunch of atoms bumping into one another, responding to other forces in our world that we really can't control. And so, but we know that that's really not the case. We do have a sense of free will. We have the ability to choose and make choices in our lives. And as such, based upon that, we know that it's more than a physical existence in this world, that there is a spiritual existence, and that man is and does have a spirit and a soul. Excuse me, a spirit and a soul. For us to have that consciousness, that sense of self. And the ability to make choices that are in contrary to our physical world and our physical surroundings. And so that in and of itself can make a determination that you are an individual, that you have a conscious being separate and apart from just a physical existence bouncing off of atoms and responding to other stimulus. You can make choices in your life, and God created us this very way so that He can deliver to us His message of love. You see, love is the key to everything, so to speak. Love is simply this. Love is being concerned. Love is looking out for the best interest of another individual. And so without the sense of self, without the sense of who we are, we really have no concept of what love really is, because we couldn't really experience looking out for the best of someone else and expecting nothing in return. There is no free will that would allow that to happen in just a physical type of setting, a physical type of environment with no spiritual or spirit implications in that message. So we know from inferences, from even our scientific world, that we do have free will and we do have the ability to make choice. And so before we get into our lesson, let's do a little introduction to our studies. Last class, we asked the question, does God think about me? Does He think about me? And the implications from that question, does He think about me, gives us further insight to, I can understand I'm separate in certain circumstances. I am a separate being from God, and God is a thinking, rational being that responds and interacts with myself. And so we ask the question, does God think about me? Which then leads to our question today. Give it some thought today. What value do you think God places on you as an individual? You know, we all place a value on people that we meet and people that we have in our lives. Loved ones, we determine that we place a great deal of value on them. Someone that may treat us not so kindly, we may place at a lower value in our assessment of an individual. And so the question we want to ask, what value do you think God places on you? How do you see yourself in relation to that value that you perceive Him to have on you? How does the value that you see yourself and what you think your value is to God affect how you see the world and others around you, and how do you respond in those situations? Do you see yourself as on the same equality as you think that God has put a value on you? You know, sometimes we may think that God has a low value of us, that He has a low opinion of me. And thinking that way, if my Creator has a low opinion of me, then certainly I would have a low opinion of myself. Because that's just the way it is. When our parents place a low value on us as children, or maybe a child in the family that has seen some rough and difficult circumstances in which the parent has placed and shown that the child is not really important to them, how does that affect the way the child sees his or herself? And how does that affect the way the child views the world around them? And so this is a very important question for us to ask, because it does determine how we view ourselves, how we have a sense of ourselves. Do we see ourselves as being valuable to God? And as being valuable to God, do we see ourselves as having value in the world? Now, of course, the scripture says, no man should think of himself more highly than he ought. It doesn't say that man shouldn't think of himself highly, period. It says that he should not think himself more highly than he ought. And so man ought to think highly of themselves, but it's in keeping a perspective of the love of God, the gift that God has given to us of life, and certainly how he views us within that sense, and that's how we ought to view ourselves. And so, just some thoughts before we get started regarding our subject this day. And so, let's move on to the idea of value. You know, the word valuable comes to mind. The word, you can separate it and say valuable. Value is what gives the ability to something to motivate it, to give it a purpose in life. So when you are value-able and you can see yourself as value-able, then you have a sense of purpose that comes through that understanding. The definition of value is something that is held dear and is given worth by its measurement against something else. It's not a measurement of put down, it's a measurement of uplifting. You place something of great value in your life. And why is it great value? It's because you have determined that that thing is measured against other things in your life, and it has risen to the level of great importance, great measurement, and great worth to you. So you hold it dear. It deserves your admiration, and it deserves an important place in your life. And it is useful, something that is useful in your life. Everyone wants to be useful in life, and so value helps us with understanding that usefulness. Let me show you my friend here. If you hear a cat meowing, this is mischief. And of course, mischief is very mischievous. So if you hear a cat moving in the background, that's That's our cat. She's 13 years old, so she does just about whatever she wants these days. But anyway, value, things that you put in your life that has value is going to be held dear to you. So let's turn and look at some scriptures regarding this idea of value. Let's go to Luke chapter 15. And in Luke, there we go. In Luke chapter 15, we have Jesus standing with and enjoying fellowship with people that were sinful. The tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus. This made the Pharisees and the religious teachers of that day complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? Those religious Jews and the Pharisees at that particular time telling Jesus he ought not to eat with sinful people because they were seen beneath them. And then Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, began and told him a couple of stories. And the first one is, if a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 in the wilderness and go and search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And when he arrives, he'll call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more rejoicing in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and turns to God than over the 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. And so at the very beginning, Jesus is talking about value, the value of people. And in his parable, he's talking about 1 out of 99. Now, that's just what? That's 1% out of 100%. Just one going astray. And of course, sheep had a tendency to stray if they saw a tuft of grass growing along the field. They would follow that tuft of grass. If they saw another one, they would follow it. And pretty soon, they would find themselves away from the flock. Even though they were enjoying something to eat, they still continued and moved away from the flock until a point that they look up and they realize, hey, I'm lost. I'm lost. And then you have the shepherd that comes in and he begins to look for this lost sheep. He leaves the 99 in the safety and he goes out and he looks for that one sheep, because that one sheep, people would say, well, what's one sheep? Why look for one? He's got 99 others. It's because one has a value. And this shepherd who was entrusted with these sheep knew its value to the owner and would go out of his way to find this. And so it says that he searched. He went through the wilderness and searching and found the one that was lost. And when he found it, notice he doesn't beat the sheep. Have you ever seen a dog that's been lost or done something that the owner is not particularly happy with, and they take that dog, and as they're walking it back home, they're beating it, you stupid dog, why did you run away? Why can't you obey me? And just beating it to a pulp. And that's not what happened with this sheep. This shepherd didn't beat the sheep. This shepherd didn't make the sheep walk back on its own. This shepherd took this sheep and placed the sheep on his shoulders. You see, the value, not in how you just perceive it, but how you treat it as well. How you treat it as something valuable to you. And notice when he got back, he didn't say, okay, this sheep is stupid and I need to get rid of it, so let's just let's just have a cookout and kill this sheep and be done with it. Not, we'll still have the 99 smart sheep that don't go wandering off. No. When he brought the sheep back, he rejoiced. He rejoiced. And so Jesus points out in his parable that he rejoiced, and he's called his neighbors together and to rejoice with him because he had found his lost sheep. And listen to this. He's talking about you and me. In the same way, there is more rejoicing in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and turns to God. He doesn't discount the 99. He doesn't discount those who are faithful to him. He's talking about a specific rejoicing that occurs when one understands their lostness. And Jesus comes along and places that lost person on his shoulders. And he carries that person. He doesn't beat them. He doesn't chastise them. He loves them. And he seeks what's best for them. Second parable. Or suppose a woman had 10 silver coins and loses one. Now we went from 100 and one lost. Now we go to 1 out of 9. Not 1 out of 100, but now 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. And she lights a lamp, and she sweeps the entire house and searches it carefully until she finds it. And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and her neighbor again. Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost coin. In the same way, there is rejoicing in the presence of God's angels, even when one sinner repents. Okay, so the first is the rejoicing that takes place in heaven. In heaven, the first in verse 7, there is more rejoicing in heaven over a lost sinner. The second parable, listen to what happens. There is joy in the presence of God's angels. What does that tell you? Not only do angels rejoice, but what does this particular passage say to you? Well, it says to me that there's rejoicing going on in the presence of God's angels, which means to me that even God is rejoicing. God is rejoicing about finding that lost soul. The value that God has placed on seeking and saving that which had been lost. This coin was lost not of its own ability. It was just carelessly misplaced. This coin had an image on it. And the longer a coin is laid in the dirt, placed in the ground, lost on the floor somewhere, the longer it is laid on the ground, the more traffic goes over that coin. And the more dirt and the more sand, the more abrasions that it takes, the longer it stays lost, the less likely the image is going to remain on that coin. And back then, the image on the coin determined its value. So here I believe Jesus in his parable is telling them about the 1 out of 10 who was lost out of carelessness, not by him, but by others. And the longer that coin stayed lost, the longer that person stayed lost, the less likely it is that that person or that sinner would ever bear the image of God once again. And so that's why she frantically searched through the house and swept the floor to find the lost coin, and the rejoicing that took place in the end. Now, of course, the last parable we get to is the parable of the lost son. And here Jesus explains that a man has two sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of the estate now before you die. That seems kind of heartless, kind of self-centered and all, but yet that's what he wanted. And so the father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this young son packed up all of his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all of his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land. Imagine that. The poorness of his planning, and how it just seems like that's always the case when we make a wrong turn and in life, and we're going along and we're thinking everything is great. Wham! We're hit with some obstacles that come along, and so his money ran out, and the great famine came, and he began to starve. And so he persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed pigs. Now, to a Jewish person, feeding pigs, that wasn't kosher. And so that was something that he was dealing with. He was so hungry that he would even go against his own traditional way of life in order to make a living or in order to eat. And so the young man became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. You see, that's the way it is in a selfish type of style of life. When the getting's good, you have a lot of folks, but when that turns on you, people tend to leave. And when he finally came to his senses, you see, he came to a sense of self. He came to his senses and said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have enough food to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I'll go to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. You see, worth. I'm no longer worthy. I'm no longer valuable to even be called your son. And so he practices what he's going to say, and then he's going to beg his father, please take me as a hired servant. And so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, you see, the heart makes the first step of a short journey when you return. The longest journey is when the heart leaves and seeks value somewhere else other than where God has placed it. And so he was a long way off, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming, and filled with love and compassion, he ran into his son and embraced him and kissed him. And he said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But before he could get the next words out, his father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get the ring for his finger and the sandals for his feet. This poor boy was even barefooted when he returned home. Kill the fatted calf, and we've been fattening, for we must celebrate with a feast. For our son of mine was dead, and now he has returned to life. He was lost, but now he's found. So the party began. And meanwhile, there was another son. You remember he had two sons. And the other son was in the fields working. And when he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And he asked the servants, what's going on? Your brother's back. What? And your father has killed the fatted calf. What? And we are celebrating because of his return safe. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. And his father came out and begged him to go inside and join the feast. But he replied, all these years I have slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me one young goat for a feast with my friends. And yet this son of yours, not my brother, but this son of yours, comes back and squandering all of your money on prostitutes, which, how did the brother know where he squandered his money? You celebrate by killing the fatted calf. And the father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and even all I have is yours. And we had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found. Now, you get the drift there. You understand that the son who went away had lost his value, and then he had returned and gained that value back. But the second son, who was living in the father's house with a great environment, his heart was far, far from understanding the valuable things of life. He had put his trust in riches and what he had hoped to gain in this world, and could not understand the message of love and compassion that comes with understanding value in somebody who's lost. You see, Jesus was speaking to the religious Pharisees who were looking at their own brothers and making a determination that they had no value. Those people were the second son. So Jesus was pointing out to them a very valid point of how they viewed themselves and how they viewed others in light of God's love for all. And all people have value. There's a particular value for you. Everyone has value. Your name is given by those who brought you into this world. Your mom and dad named you. They gave you a name and bringing you into being. And you can always replace workers. You can always replace laborers. But you can never replace a person. Persons are unique. They are distinct. And don't ever let anybody minimize who you are. God loves you. And you are a single individual who is loved and has value, no matter what the circumstances are. Let me give you a quick illustration. I have a $20 bill. That's probably the only $20 bill that I've had in my pocket in a long time. This $20 bill. It's all crisp and, it's pretty nice, pretty new bill. How much is it worth? Well, you'd say $20 because it says it right on there, $20. Okay, well, what if I crumpled it up? What if I crumpled it up and then said, okay, now how much is it worth? You can't see the value on it, but it's a $20 bill, so it's still worth $20, though it's crumpled up like this. Well, what if I uncrumpled it, and now it has all these lines and all of these markings on it, and I say to the $20 bill, you're worthless, you're just worthless, and I tell you it's worthless. Would you still want to have it? Of course you'd say, well, yes, I want to have it. Why? Because it hasn't lost its value just by how it's worn, how it may be torn. Just because I called it worthless doesn't make it worthless. What if I dropped it on the floor and I stomped on it a couple of times, put some dirt on it and said, you don't want that $20 bill. You still want it? Of course you would, because it's worth something. And what is it worth? It's worth what it's backed by. It's just a piece of paper. Just a funny little piece of paper with markings on it and numbers on it and somebody's name and somebody's picture. But yet we know its worth. It has value. It can buy something. It has a purpose. When we look at ourselves, and our value, do we see ourselves the same way? We may have wrinkles. We may have been told in our life at some point that you're worthless. We have have found ourselves down in the dirt and people stepping all over us. But we still have value. Let's keep that in mind as we go along with our study. A few more minutes and we'll be done. What gives you your value? Well, number one, God created you. God doesn't make junk. We've heard that several times. In the beginning of Genesis, it tells us how God breathed into us the breath of life. He gave us life. The most valuable thing of all is life. He gave it to us. He gave it freely to us. Out of His mercy and out of His kindness, He provided it to us. We are created in His image. In the first part of Genesis, it says, God speaking to Himself, an interesting study there. It says, let us make man in our image, and after our likeness, let us create man. And in His image, He created him man, both male and female. And He created them in His image. And so we are created in the image of God. And what is that image? Well, man is made up of a spirit, as God is made up of a spirit. And man is made up of a soul, a consciousness, a determination, a way of determining the sense of self. And also man has a physical body, just as Christ took on the physical body when He came to this earth. We are made after that image. Our families are made after the image of the God, the one God of the Bible, made up of three distinct persons. A family is made up of a father, a mother, and a child. And we can see clearly within this unit, though three distinct individuals, these individuals came together with a purpose, with unity and harmony, dwelling together as God would have it. We are created in God's image, and that gives us value. Anything that God created ain't junk. It is valuable, and the value comes from what price God places on that. Number two, the Creator cares and loves us. You don't love something that doesn't have value. That's pretty hard to do. But God loves us, and He loves you. He loves me. He loves me even when I'm not the type of person I should be. He still loves me. He's not wanting that anybody should perish, but all should come to repentance. That's what Paul says. Why? Because we have value to the Creator. He has chosen to put His glory in us. He has chosen us to be the crowning work of His masterful plan. He cares and He loves us. Number three, God paid the highest price for us. You know, if we're all just a bunch of atoms bouncing, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter because we would have no free will. But because we do have free will, we can understand that we have a spirit, and we have spiritual laws that should govern our lives. And when we don't, and we break those laws, God says we are deserving of death, of spiritual separation from Him in eternal hell. And that's where we were destined to go once we decided and lived the life of doing things against his will. But that's not what he wanted. And so he provided a way by bringing himself to the earth, giving Jesus to us. Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory as the only begotten of the Father, John chapter 1. And even those who were religious rejected him and placed him on the cross. He died, perfect Lamb of God, spotless. And he died so that we can be free from sin, free from the guilt and shame of sin. And to see ourselves as God sees us, as being pure. That's why Peter would say in his letters, I think it's 1st or 2nd Peter 3, along about verse 20, he says, he's talking about Noah in the days of old, how he was saved through water. And he says the likeness today in that, the type, the fulfillment of Noah being saved in water is baptism. And Peter says, baptism doth now save us. It's not the washing of the filth of the flesh, but it's an answer of a good conscience. An answer of a good conscience before God. That word good conscience there means interrogation. You have interrogated your heart. And once you interrogate your heart and you see the value God has placed on you and how this world has rubbed that value off, has rubbed that image off, and you've allowed that to happen and taken rebellious steps against God. When you come to yourself and you interrogate your heart, the first thing you'll scream out is, give me water. Give me water, because that's the plan of Jesus. He said, he that believes and is baptized shall be saved. Give me water. Let me be saved. Let me be pure. Paul would say in Acts chapter 2, verse 38, that this baptism was for the remission, the washing away of sins. Paul would do that when Ananias said, now, Paul, why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized, washing away your sin, calling on the name of the Lord. You see, God provided the way through his providence and his love, in which he paid the highest price, because he values you and he values me more than anything. That's his love. You are valuable. My brothers, don't give up. Don't give up. That's our lesson for today. I hope it's encouraging you. I'm enjoying doing these. I wished I was present. I find it very hard to talk to a screen and just see my ugly mug on the screen. I would love to see your faces and to hear your responses. And so may God continue to bless you, and may you stay healthy, be at peace with one another, and fulfill the love of Christ wherever you are. Thank you for your time.